All right, hey, I want to thank you all for coming today. This is actually our third Lunch and Learn. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Restrooms are down on the right. You know where the food is. You've seen that. I want to welcome all of you. We have some great guests today, as well as some great speakers. They'll be following right after me. I just want to take some time and say the reason that we do these because we believe that the information that we can disseminate in these types of forums is very important to all of you. Whether you're a dealership, a fleet, I think these are extremely important to know what your options are. Our sources are telling us we're not going to see complete stabilization of the supply chain until probably late this year, early next year. So in the interim, we have to have ways to work around these supply shortages. We have lots of important and experienced folks in the room that can give us those guidance. So I hope that you all enjoy the presentation. I'll be saying a few words. I'll be kicking it off to John Rupert, and then we'll have Stephen Dickey speak last, and we'll go from there. So without further ado, let's start talking through some of the points in the presentation. Vehicle ownership is a significant expense to our fleets, as well as the cost of ownership. What we're seeing now is folks are keeping fleet vehicles much longer. They're not cycling them out as much as they should have, or as quick as they used to, and that's what we're seeing. So there's just not as much available. With the MSRP prices going up, other things going up due to supply chain and raw material shortages, we're seeing all of those things increase. So we have to be able to make the vehicles more efficient and keep them longer on the road and in service. So I think that's important for all of us to understand, and I know a lot of you are feeling the pain of that as we go through this. Ownership challenges. Satisfying demand when your current fleet vehicles are in for service. So we're hearing it all the time. Hey, I've got one in, don't have enough for my guy that I just hired. All of those different things I think are important. Additional expense of a cargo management system, capitalizing on the short-term spikes in demand. That's the biggest question I get from our fleets. Like, when should they add one? What is the equation? Tim, I've got 16 projects going on, but I'm afraid I'm only going to have 8 next week. How do I manage? How do I control the demand of what we're seeing in their business? So I think that's important. And the vehicle shortage from a replenishment perspective. We've got a few folks here. There's a lot of consolidation going on in the trades, especially HVAC and plumbing. I think all of our plumbing companies, they've either started an HVAC division or they've been bought by an HVAC company. So I think that's very important. And what we're seeing now is not just new vehicles, but a few used vehicles, a year or so old with about 20,000 miles on them. We just probably got, in the last 10 days, we've probably done 5 upfits of vehicles that fit that category that came somewhere out of Akron. So our local fleets are reaching out on their own beyond what we're helping on a local basis too. So I think that's important. And I think for those of you that don't have those contacts, we have those contacts. So we can help match make, if you will, on some of those situations where you need more vehicles. Limited flexibility. The high cost of ownership means there isn't a lot of flexibility to try out and test new types of vehicles or cargo management systems. The risk of investing in a solution that doesn't work is too high and inhibits innovation. So what we've done on our end, and I think a lot of you know this, we have a 30-day just right guarantee where if we're implementing cargo management systems in a vehicle that may not work exactly the way that we had hoped, we're flipping them out 30 days for free. We just had a situation last week with a Mike Albert fleet management customer where we're having to exercise that guarantee. So I think that's important. Our folks are also, we're seeing a lot more what I'm calling blended fleets than what we've seen in the past, where they'll have a van, they'll have a truck, they'll have a box truck, they may even have a subcompact van. They might have all of them. So you're seeing a lot more blended fleets too. So the ability to deliver on all of those different platforms, the solution that best works efficiency-wise is critical going forward. I'll tell you this, we've had customers now, and you guys probably see this too, they would have never considered a truck before. What wasn't even on their radar screen. But now they're taking what they can get. So I think that's something we all have to keep in mind in helping in that realm, that situation. So I want to just talk through. We're just getting creative. If you guys have been to our other roundtables, you know we try to give you some creative ideas, ways to think that might help out your situation or your inability to, get that traditional vehicle that you're used to in a traditional way that you're used to getting it. So I just wanted to share some ideas that we have come across here that we're seeing a little bit more of. Renting. I don't know if you've seen some of the companies here locally, Fluid Truck being one. You can rent an upfitted vehicle on a short-term rent. There's a couple others as well. There's one, the guy, I've seen it a couple times, they must have done a major TV push. Do you remember I sent it to you, and the guy jumps out of the van while the van's still moving? Bumblebee or something maybe. They're doing short-term wraps and short-term rentals. So we're seeing that more. There is a Fluid Truck here, dealership here in Columbus, leasing, and then also sharing too. I know this sounds odd when it relates to commercial vehicles, but we're seeing a few of our customers share vehicles with one another. And it happened 3 weeks ago, and this is what happened. They hired a new guy. A plumbing customer of ours had an extra van that we had upfitted. They didn't have use for it at the moment. Other company B, it was a drain company, needed a vehicle, and we married the two together, and they were able to work it out for a few weeks. So I don't think there's a platform out there right now that's sharing from an upfitted van perspective, but there's enough of them out there sharing commercial vehicles. So just some creative ways, but we're seeing each of those, especially the short-term rental thing is happening a lot around here. So I think it's thinking things differently. So I want to introduce John Rupert from Adrian Steel. I'll let John talk about his background, but we're happy that you're here. It's a blessing to everyone that gets to see this content, that they're going to get some insight from you at a very strategic level. So if you, come on up if you wouldn't mind.
Adrian Steel. We do three things. We manufacture much of our content that goes in. We're also an installation facility for large fleets with ship-through facilities strategically located around the country. And then the third thing is we actually own some of our distribution around the country as well. So we're kind of all three layers of the vertical, which I think is an advantage because I think we understand the ecosystem a little bit better than maybe some of our competitors. So for that, we're very grateful. I wanted to kind of piggyback on some of Tim's comments and talk a little bit about some alternative ways of thinking about running your fleet. But before I do that, I thought I would take a minute and just share some numbers. The pain that you're feeling for lack of vehicles is not something that you're just dreaming or imagining. It's actually real. And the best way to kind of reinforce that is to take a look at what's happened in the North American market over the last 3 years. And you can see here, and what's not on the screen, which I think is important, in 2019, the industry was actually 17 million. So it went from 17 million to under 14 million in less than 3 years. And of course, now we're starting to see it pick back up. What I would tell you is 2024, most of the pundits have a prediction of somewhere around 15.5 to 16 million, which is not full recovery, but so that would be positioned right here, kind of post 2023. But there's a direct correlation between what happened with microchips and other supply chain parts as well, but primarily microchips, and what happened to the SAR. And it was a trailing effect. So you can see that the 3.1 million vehicles lost to microchips, the impact started to happen almost a year later, where it went from 15.1, we were dealing with the pandemic here, but it went from 15.1 to 13.9, primarily driven by what happened with microchips. So there was some inventory that they were able to live off of for a while, but ultimately as we got towards the end of 21 and 22 in particular, that inventory buffer started to wear thin. The other thing that's not on here that I wanted to just share with you, because many of the regional fleets that we do business with historically have lived off of dealer inventory for short-term needs. And typically across the US, there'd be somewhere around 2.5 to 3 million units in dealer inventory collectively. That's all cars, trucks, everything, not just commercial vehicles. That got to as low as 700,000 at its trough. So you can kind of do the math. It was like a 75% reduction in dealer inventory. And that's why you couldn't order it, because there wasn't as much production and selling going on. You couldn't get it out of inventory, and hence the shortages that we all felt. So if we go to the next slide, this is just some of the common themes. These are some of our largest supply chain issues, if you will, from an upfitter standpoint. I think there's some commonality across multiple vocations and industries, but not only did we have volatility with pricing in steel and aluminum, there were some major swings in the cost of raw material in that space, which is a key component for us. But it was also the availability. So you had pricing and availability both working against us. We've also seen, at least within the last 15 years, historical highs on plastics. Some of our purchased products rely on plastics, as well as corrugated. Now we don't upfit corrugated, but when we ship product to our distribution network, it's in corrugated containers, and so once again, shortage as well as volatility in pricing. So, and then the last thing in terms of just that particular, the corrugated and the shipping, obviously the fuel prices and what it costs us to ship product to our distribution network had a lot of volatility as well. The electrical component lead times remain at historical highs. That hasn't corrected itself quite as quickly as some of the other things, and primarily because they're internationally sourced. Much of the electrical components come from overseas. So if you remember those pictures on the West Coast of 33 container ships sitting waiting to get into port, well, that's where a lot of the electrical components were. So we could manufacture steel all day long, but if we didn't have the electrical components to finish the upfit, then we had to hit the pause button. And last but not least, and probably the one that doesn't get enough publicity, but I know all of you are dealing with it in your own businesses as well as the people who you partner with, it's the availability of labor. Post-pandemic, it was a huge problem, and quite frankly, I think it's one of the hardest ones to solve in a business. So those are some of the things we're dealing with. I wanted to just also spend a minute and talk a little bit about what the segmentation, and this, Tim, you were mentioning this too, and gets at kind of mixed fleets and things like that. I mean, we're kind of, our specialty is in full-size vans. That's where we play, in compact vans as well. Most of you may know that this is the last calendar year where there's going to be compact vans in the U.S. market. So those customers have to go somewhere, what they buy and what they own. And we've done some research and leaned into the OEMs, and we believe that migration is going to be about 50% back into some type of a full-size van, probably a low-roof derivative on the Ford and Stellantis side, and GM obviously has their one-size-fits-all. And then the other half is going to be split between full-size and compact pickups. That's kind of where we think it's going. And if you were at NTA this past week, you would have seen us with a display property or two, I guess, actually upfitted with pickup chassis. And primarily, we look at that as an incremental opportunity. And Tim, it gets at what you were talking about earlier, that I think fleets are being forced to look at alternatives beyond just van-based product for doing commercial work. The other thing I would tell you is, obviously this is still a pretty substantial part of the market, but this space right here is where we're seeing the most activity on electrification. And obviously, you know, probably most of you know about E-Transit from Ford, and Mercedes has announced an E version, and Stellantis has got an E version coming. But listen to this list of names of vans also coming to the market, if not already here. Mullen, which is Bollinger Motors, Canoo, Rivian, Arrival, Tesla Robovan, Bright Drop, Blue Arc, which is Shift Group, and then you've got the GM Chevy electric van, which has been made public, and then Ford Transit, Mercedes, and ProMaster. So why do I bring that up? Well, the compact vans went away in the United States because it's too crowded. This segment's not large enough to support that many manufacturers. There's going to be winners and losers. So I would just suggest that if you're choosing a platform for EV applications, do your research, make sure that company's going to be around long term. I just don't think there's enough space. There's not enough product, not enough business to support that much product. The next slide. So some other ways, how do we attack this shortage? And Tim, you talked about it, some ideas. I thought those were really good. These are a couple of more. The used vehicle alternative. Some of our distribution points around the country really had to lean in hard over the last 18 months to use product that they could find in the market. And there's some advantages to it. First of all, historically, and it's been this way even through the pandemic, the size of the used vehicle market is about 2 to 1. So if there's 15 million units of new units being sold in the market, there's about 30 million used. So typically there's product available out there to get your hands on. Obviously lead times, they're all localized product. You might have to move it from one city to the next, but for the most part, there should be little or no lead time concerns if you choose a used product. And then, there's a lot of companies out there now that'll do like new financing on used product, particularly if it's a nearly new 25,000 miles or less. So there's some thoughts around used vehicles. The next slide talks a little bit about another way of attacking the vehicle shortage issue, and that's what I would call labor efficiencies. And this gets a little bit grimbly, but the point here is if you're a fleet of 20 units and you can find 20% efficiency, you could argue that you might only need 16 vans instead of 20. And so one of the things that we're really, as part of our innovation journey at Adrian Steel, is we're trying to kind of apply that principle both in the local market, but also with our larger fleets, and do labor. How do you use the product? And that's all the concept of the connect model that I know is here and is our philosophy across our distribution network.
I have a question before you go. Based on what you saw at the show, from a new EV manufacturer, which one were you most impressed with? Not the big OEMs, but maybe one of the newer or one of the startups. Who were you most?
So you're saying besides Ford?
Yeah, besides Ford.
or Stellantis. I would say the product that I was intrigued the most by was Canoe.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
It was such a unique design, very space efficient. Had at least projected range was pretty good, and I think it with the elimination of the small cargo vans,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of maybe has a space fits right into that space. So that's one stood out to me. It's a very rounded. It's about the size of the compact cargo vans that are out there, but almost a rounded box is what it looks like. So it's a lot of space efficiency. Anyway, the good news is I think the vehicle shortage is going to improve slowly but surely, and I think your timeline about kind of getting back to normal in 2024 is probably pretty accurate based on everything I've read.
Hello everyone, I'm Stephen Dickey from Seelig Leasing, based in the Midwest in Ohio. We are a nationwide fleet management company, predominantly in the commercial, but sales rep vehicles, etc., vans, trucks, larger trucks, etc. What I wanted to talk about was the difference, a different alternative, and everyone's heard of Enterprise and Mike Albert, and we have dealership partners. You've got to love your dealerships. We love our dealerships. We work with hundreds of dealerships across the United States. But what I want to talk about was the alternative to buying, because we're in a cash flow society right now. Cash is king. So I'll tell you a little bit about the company, our advantages, benefits of a replacement policy if you can find vehicles, how we acquire vehicles. We are a full service shop, which I'll show in another slide, so that if you need upfits, if you need graphics, if you need anything done, our motto is turnkey, ready to go solution. So Nick right here, we acquire the Ford through him, or Chevrolet, or GMC. We do the upfits, the branding, the wrap, zero money out of the customer's pocket for a turnkey solution. We also do, I'll talk about the open and lease funding. We're our own bank. There's a reason why about 80% of companies are now leasing their vehicles. There's a tax benefit. There's a huge tax benefit. But we're on our own bank, which means we're not bound by the rules. We don't have to file that on the personal credit score or the business credit score. So when you see all these new vans, you're like, how are they doing this? There's a reason why they're leasing them. There's a tax advantage, as well as they're not leveraging themselves as far as personal and company credit score. Next page. We are owned by Bud Selig, former commissioner of Major League Baseball. I think he's worth about $500 million right now. But what that gives us with our credit lines is the accessibility for finding alternative funding solutions for our customers. Next page. We are a full circle company. So that means from new and used vehicles, yeah, we'll look at used. Now, if you're telling me you want a 2012 F-250 with 180,000 miles, I'm probably going to tell you we're not a partner for that vehicle. Equipment, we'll look at equipment. Again, graphics, design, special financing, flexible terms. Our leases are predominantly 12 months minimum term. Most of our customers, because of cash flow, 60 months. If a van costs $40,000, upfitted, I wish they cost $40,000. That was 3 years ago. $40,000 with all of the upfits. The graphics, we lease it down to 20% of its value, $8,000. We know after 5 years, unlimited mileage, no wear and tear penalties, Nick, hit it with a hammer. Put a dent in it. When that car, when that truck, vehicle, van goes to auction, you will get more than $8,000 based on that methodology, 60 down to 20. Don't care how many miles. When you're done with it, the other benefit versus some of our competitive counterparts, all of the profit off that vehicle is yours. You have full ownership of that vehicle. We're just reducing and doing better cash flow for you down to residual price. So the equity in that vehicle is yours. It is your vehicle. We're just the finance company. We do offer maintenance programs, but the biggest piece right now, how do we get rid of these vehicles? You don't have time to let someone test drive your vehicle all the time. That's lack of productivity. We take an auction, Mannheim, Odessa, or let's say you want to sell to an employee at the company. We'll do all the paperwork for you, send the vehicle on its way. But again, all of that profit is yours to keep off that vehicle. That's why people are leasing their vehicles now. Next page. Acquisition, new and used. We love our dealership partners. We've bought vehicles from you, definitely vehicles from you. I hate to say Bo Townsend, yes, Marion Ford, all across the country. What we do, they get the benefit of the sale, but we also are your partner to make sure that you're getting any fleet rebates associated, making sure that vehicle is the right vehicle for you, and then packaging it all into one component. Again, predominantly factory orders is really the only way to get a cargo van now. It used to be a lot of availability of vans, but we do have strategic partnerships. Like, for example, we just got 75 Ram ProMasters on the ground. We ordered them 12 to 18 months ago. Finally came in, but we have sources to get vehicles. So obviously, acquisition savings. The other benefit about Selig and some other leasing companies, we don't have brick and mortars to pay for. So, if we're talking about Enterprise or Mike Albert, we all get the same fleet rebate on the vehicle. We don't have brick and mortars to pay for, so acquisition cost is yours. We're not marking up the van for pure profit reasons. Another huge benefit for leasing, again, lower repair costs. You're cycling the vehicles. Now, every vehicle's different. An F-250, Chevrolet 2500, 120 to 140,000 miles, that's the sweet spot. But again, why are you leasing versus owning? Used to be, drive it till the wheels fall off. Well, you put a transmission in, you put an engine in, you're married to that vehicle now. It still needed a transmission and engine just for you to sell it, but now you have an abundant maintenance cost in it. Get rid of it before major maintenance repairs occur. Maximize resale value on it. Get your usage out of it and move on. There's a trend because you can't find new inventory, driving older vehicles longer. Again, there's a lack of availability of parts as well. Gas mileage goes down. It's a curve. The longer you keep it, your maintenance cost goes up drastically. Fuel mileage goes down. Next slide, please. Less downtime, productivity, we talked about that. When a truck goes out for maintenance at a dealership, whether it's a day or 2 weeks, can you calculate that cost of having that truck not on the road in production? I can. Everyone of your customers, they know their return on investment. Lack of productivity means you're spending more money. Safer vehicles. Things are changing. You know, I think it was 2017, backup cameras became standard. Bluetooth became standard because if you're caught on your phone, you're going to get a ticket. The industry is changing. If you see next, employee morale and retention. No one likes to drive. Okay, well, it's a 2004 F-150 and it's rusting through. Not only is it an image to your customers, but to your employees, the morale is down. Company image, talked about that. Let's go to the next slide. Hiring advantage, everyone likes pretty vehicles. I'd love to drive that van right there. With the graphics on it, I'd drive that. That'd be date night vehicle. I'm kidding. So again, employee morale, consistent brand image, cost savings, better resale value, 36 months. We have a huge customer down in Cincinnati, F-250s, 160,000 miles in 39 months. They're making $6,000 to $7,000 off those trucks when they go to auction, and they're dirty, but they're well maintained. That's where it's at. Next slide. Again, I talked about this curve. Time equals cost. The longer you hold that vehicle, this green maintenance, it starts drastically going up. So the sweet spot on cargo vans versus trucks, we can calculate that for you, but everything's a little different. Like a cargo van, I'd say 150,000 miles. It's time to move. It's time to move. Next slide. These are old estimates, and it used to be, I'll use a Chevrolet cargo van. Our fleet buy 3 years ago was $26,000 compared to $34,000 MSRP, right? Then your upfits, whatever. Used to be, well, I drove it and put 3 engines in it. Yep, there's $15,000. But the longer you keep it, the value goes down. The value starts drastically. Now, here lately, because of lack of availability, a 3-year-old pickup truck with 60,000 miles is worth more than what it was MSRP brand new. It is absolutely absurd. But for the long haul, the longer you keep it, the vehicles decline. Cash is king, cash is king. You turn on the TV, it's all bad news, bad news, bad news. Company owners now have 2 decisions to make. I want to grow. I have customers that I'm turning down because I don't have cash to grow the business. That's why people are leasing. Increased cash flow, equity opportunity at the end of the lease. All of that equity on that vehicle is theirs to keep. We have customers that when we sell an F-150 at the auction, here's a check for $6,000. Company owners, that every time you take that 6 and put it down on another vehicle, now your cost of ownership gets lower every time you cycle your vehicle. Or here's $6,000, invested for future expansion. The other thing that we do, it's not in here, is we have customers that have been cash rich. They bought all their vehicles. Now they don't have money for expansion. It's called cash infusion. If you need money for expansion, we can buy your entire fleet from you, release them to you, and disperse the cash to you for environments where you need cash for expansion. Next slide. Again, we can sell the vehicles to employee or personal. We can sell them on our lots. Bud Selig owns multiple lots. However, the best bang for the buck, and dealers buy vehicles here too, the auctions. It's not, it's wholesale. So it's less than the retail, but again, you don't have to go on every test drive with a potential buyer. And those prices are going up. Next slide. Fleet maintenance. We have a fleet maintenance program as well. On a lot of the newer vehicles, I tell you, a Chevrolet cargo van bought on a fleet program, 5-year, 100,000 powertrain warranty. You don't need a maintenance program. Keep that money in the bank. Oil changes, tires, brakes. Oil changes, tires, brakes. Next slide. Fuel management, we work with WEX as well, so companies like having that corporate card. I can't tell you how many times they have caught fraud with employees having a fuel card where you put premium fuel, the transit only uses regular unleaded, and it was on a Saturday. Were you taking your boat to the lake? Yeah. Next slide. It's. I mean, they're welcomed everywhere. We can forward through this. But again, number one reason 80% of companies are now leasing their vehicles, especially larger companies. Cash flow, tax benefits, not paying full tax on the purchase price of the vehicle, only on the payments you're making, cycling out, lowering maintenance costs. It's a puzzle. And when you have all those pieces together, it works. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Compared to your competition, that owner keeping the equity, is that kind of unique to you folks, or other fleet management companies do it as well? Because I haven't heard it that clearly.
So I will not mention names, but every time I go against some of our competition, yeah, we sold this van. Well, how well did I do? Nope, here's your new van. Because we're a financer, that vehicle is yours. You have ownership on it. All of the equity is yours to keep. There are some companies that have kept 50% of that. Or, most importantly, especially with all of these upfits, like in vans, a lot of our competition requires the end user to pay for those upfits. We'll lease you the van, but not the full ready-to-go-to-work product. That's where we specialize in.
Okay.